Good afternoon, everybody. Today I am interviewing deep dive contributor Braden Maccke. In this interview, we talk about the current debacle that's happening with Canada Soccer and a private corporation that seemingly owns the majority of the asset value within the Canadian National Soccer Program called Canada Soccer Business. We talk about Elon fatigue, and we get into Braden's pieces on bridging finance. All right, everybody, enjoy the interview. Braden, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Chris and Steve. Happy to be here.
Really, you already forgot who's interviewing you?
I got all these people in my headphones, and so it's complicated. There's a lot of stuff going on here.
Okay, so Braden, first topic I want to talk about. You covered the Canadian Soccer Association drama that seemingly took another step forward this week. What is Canadian Soccer Business, or the Canadian Soccer Business? Give us a little breakdown of what's happening here, and then I want the Braden take on who's to blame.
Yeah. Okay. I got some notes on that right here. I'm glad you asked. See, Steve called me on this show, and he didn't tell me what we were talking about.
No prep.
So I'm getting
it's Braden off the cuff.
That's Steve. Just when you're ready for the hard one, bottom falls out, right? But anyway, okay. So here we go. Canadian Soccer Business. Okay, so Canada Soccer, right, is like the National Soccer Federation of Canada. It's a not-for-profit business that's concerned with developing soccer in Canada. So that organization is it doesn't have any shareholders. It's basically a charity, and any money it makes goes back into its mission, right? And that entity is the entity that coaches, trains, and administers the Canada men's team and the Canada women's national team, right? That are our national teams that are members of FIFA, members of CONCACAF, or whatever that is. And that is, and the men's team is playing in the World Cup. They have secured a World Cup berth for the World Cup that's going to happen in Canada here in 2023? I can't remember. Anyone know?
I
doesn't matter. For our purposes, that doesn't matter. But here's the point: is that in 2018 or 2019, that entity, Canada Soccer, signed an agreement with something called Canada Soccer Business, which is a for-profit enterprise that is owned by the same people that own and administer the Canadian Premier League, which is a pro soccer league in Canada, which
that nobody's
isn't
heard of.
Really. Sorry?
That nobody's heard of. No,
yeah, it's not big, right? I mean, God bless those teams for playing soccer, I guess, but it's not, I mean, this isn't a big deal. Like all of the three major soccer teams in Canada, Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver, they play in MLS. They play in the American League because that's where the money is, right? That's where you're on a larger stage and playing with better and bigger talent, et cetera. And, I guess the notion is the Canadian Premier League could develop, et cetera. But the deal that was made with Canada Soccer Business between Canada Soccer and Canada Soccer Business, which is owned by the same investors as the Canadian Premier League, is that they got the rights to broadcast Canada men's national team and Canada women's national teams for 10 years. For $3 million a year. So Canada Soccer Business pays $3 million. And we just found out it was $3 million a year. Shout out Rick Westhead of TSN, who's been all over this story. He's got some great coverage from Rick. I think that's his name. In any case, the $3 million a year, Canada Soccer Business, the for-profit entity, pays Canada Soccer for the rights to negotiate their broadcasting rights with whoever they want to negotiate it with, to like resell them. Like they buy them for $3 million and they can resell the broadcasting rights and also the marketing rights. So they're doing a deal with Gatorade too. They're doing a deal with all kinds of stuff. And all Canada Soccer gets is that $3 million, right? For the 10 years. And then at the end of the 10 years, they have an option to re-up. Right. So they can, at Canada Soccer Business's option, they can redo it. So it's a hell of a deal. Right. Because, if you hear they're at the time, they hadn't made the World Cup yet or were about to make the World Cup. And this deal was signed, and they, the players obviously are wondering what the hell's going on. because now that they have made the World Cup, they got a $10 million bonus from FIFA, right? That gives you the bonus for making the World Cup. And now the players are going, okay, well, we did the work here and we made the World Cup and we stuck together and we went down and played above our heads and filled the net and made it. So, it's time to pay us. Let's go. And Canada Soccer is telling the players, hey, sorry, we don't got the money. We need that 10 million to run this business because we just gave away our TV rights to Canada Soccer Business for $3 million a year. So we don't really have the money to pay you. And so now that's when this whole kind of thing went public, and they walked out of a game, or they walked out of a friendly against Panama in Vancouver here, and that was our first coverage of it. That was the article that I wrote at that time. Was that they walked out and they're making public statements about, hey, what about this Canada Soccer Business? Why did they get these TV rights for $3 million? What the hell, right? Which is, a fair question, I suppose. But whether or not that's the player's problem is kind of an open question, right? Because if the players are going, listen, you got $10 million from FIFA, we want our cut. We made this other crappy deal isn't really an answer, right? Like that's kind of the deal Canada Soccer made. Like why maybe they shouldn't have done that, but that doesn't mean that the players don't get paid because of the administration's poor decision. Rick Westhead also has some interesting back and forth about whether or not this deal was actually approved. Apparently, there are members of the board who said, of the board of Canada Soccer, who said that this got brought to us and we looked at it and we said we wanted to know more about Canada Soccer Business and what it was and how it did before we approved it. And nobody actually approved it. And then it was just approved at the next meeting. They just acted like it was approved. At least that's what former board members and current board members said to Westhead. So this could come down to whether or not there are minutes of this meeting, whether they can see that it was approved, et cetera, et cetera. But meanwhile, you've got a National Soccer Administration that clearly made a bad deal, arguably doesn't know what it's doing, and a bunch of players who want to get paid and should get paid. Frankly,
so just being honest here, if you are the owners of Canadian Soccer Business or whatever they're called, Canada Soccer Business, I don't know, you kind of bought a call option on the Canadian national men's team, right? Because there's going to be a lot of cash flow revenue generated from that. Don't you assume that if you actually hit that blue sky scenario, which somebody who's in tune with the up and coming players understands that there's a real possibility that this could happen, don't you assume that like the players have a lot of leverage here and they're very likely to fight against this and you're going to have to renegotiate?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. And it comes down to, how much leverage do they actually have? Will they? Because you remember when they walked out on that Panama friendly, like that's a friendly, like that doesn't count, right? They're just just kind of kicking it around. Are they going to start walking out on qualifiers, right? Are they going to start walking out on actual World Cup games? Right? Do they got the balls to do that? I mean, that might be it, right? That might be what it comes down to. Because Canada Soccer Business may well be going, oh, you don't want to play in the World Cup because you want more money? Okay. And may be able to play chicken with them on that. I mean, I don't know. Because it doesn't seem to me like they would walk out on World Cup games. I mean, it's World Cup, right? This is their shot, right? There's like 4 years from now, they're going to be older, right? They don't know if they're going to qualify, like all kinds of stuff. Right. So it's a touchy situation. Right. I think the real question is, I think an organization like Canada Soccer Business is a really interesting one, especially in a developing sport like soccer, right? Like, because really what needs to happen is the money's got to go back into the clubs. The money has to go back into training. So it would be really good for Canada or for Canadian soccer, if they could have a national team that was very popular, made a lot of TV revenue, and all that revenue went back to a not-for-profit organization that put it back into soccer, right? That's how you end up with players that are that are very good, and that can compete with the Brazils and the Germanys and the Argentinas, where they're producing terrific players all the time because it's all there is, right? Here, when a kid grows up, he wants to play hockey, he wants to play baseball, right? He wants to play football, maybe he wants to play soccer. Guys do play soccer, right? But it's not number one, right? So your best athletes aren't going in there. But if you start investing in the clubs and there's more resources for it and there's better coaching there, there sure are enough kids playing soccer, but they're mostly just kicking it around. If we're going to, create international level players, there has to be investment in that. Right. And certainly a national team doing well and creating good revenue is a fantastic way to do that. And why you do a deal with a company. I don't see why Canada Soccer can't market those TV rights themselves, right? They can hire a consultant. They can do. It's not like they got no money. It shouldn't be. It doesn't make any sense to me that Canada Soccer business can do anything different, right? Other than direct the revenue to their shareholders, right? Canada National Soccer should be able to do that all on their own, to get a TV deal. And get marketing deals with Gatorade and whatever. They're the ones holding all the cards. They're the ones who own the rights in the first place to this team and to these broadcast rights. And I really don't understand why they'd split that off ever at all, right? And honestly, the board's now saying, "Oh well, we didn't really approve this." I think the question should have been, when this came, like, why did they even consider this, right? Like, there's like, what's the? I guess that the $3 million's a sure thing, right? I guess maybe, but I would be interested to learn what they had to say about that.
Yeah. Okay, so changing gears here. I know you've been following the Twitter story quite a bit.
Twitter and Elon.
And then we got Trump is now in the mix. I gotta tell you, Braden, I've got Elon fatigue. I wake up in the morning and I'm reading so much about Elon. I'm talking so much about Elon. I'm tired of it. I feel like the media shunned Donald Trump. They said, okay, you got to go. And then they got upset because all their ratings went to crap because they didn't have Donald Trump to get angry at and get their viewers, coming back to get angry about. And then they found Elon Musk, and pretty much everything Elon does, he gets, to go up. He gets a platform at the town square where he gets to go talk, and the media's all over it. You think that this that if this Twitter thing works against him and he ends up looking quite foolish, that this could be the end of Elon being in the spotlight?
I think it'll come down to whether people want to click on it or not, right? Like, there's all kinds of,
but don't you think that part of the reason, like, you watch mainstream media, right? And there's a lot of reasons to not like Elon Musk. And everybody, like, for the most part, he's still considered this wildly successful businessman. And that inspires people. And for the most part, Donald Trump, 5 years ago, maybe 8 years ago, was largely considered that himself. The media's dragged him through the mud so much that I don't think a lot of people would consider him to be that successful of a businessman today. But
liberal
really,
media, they're trying to ruin me. They're trying to,
But do you kind of think, though, that if Elon has a deal where he just tried to act like a total gangster, I'm just going to take over Twitter, just watch me do this. I'll just make it up as I go along. Oh, I don't want to do it anymore. Just watch this. I'll just own the court system. If they go into the Delaware court or whatever it's called, and Elon ends up losing this battle, and the court forces him to buy Twitter against his will. You think that this is the end of the legend of Elon with the mainstream media?
Well, it'll largely, how the media treats him will largely depend on whether it's in their interest to cover him, whether there's something better that comes along, that's what matters, right? Is if people do get Elon fatigue and change the channel when he's on, then yeah, they'll find something else, right? But for now, they haven't. I think you're right. I think he was making it up as he went. I think he just kind of like look, on one level, he just wanted Twitter and was like, "Oh, I can buy it. Let's do this. Let's figure it out as we go." Right. And then basically the market tanked, and now he doesn't want to pay what he agreed to pay. Right. Which is sort of what it comes down to. If it was a sideways bet, then he'd have just bought it. Right. He'd raised the money and bought it. But now Twitter's worth a lot less because the whole market's worth a lot less. So he's trying to slip the hook on it on a price thing, I think. Right. I originally thought that he wanted that platform and wanted control of that platform because that's how he operates is through media control, right? He's the ultimate stock promoter and wants the ultimate platform. I don't know. That kind of gives him a lot of credit for forethought. I think he might just like Twitter and want it, right? There's also the idea that, like, look, he's the richest man in the world, right? It's all equity, right? So he's got to have a way to move his equity out of Tesla stock, right? He can't just hit sell and sit on the cash, right? He's got to do something that isn't going to make it look like he's selling it because he doesn't believe in the price, right? And selling it to buy Twitter is something, right? Like if you're just selling a bunch of Tesla stock, well, everyone else is going to sell with you. But if you're selling because you need the money to do your Twitter deal, right? Then people are okay. Right, then probably a lot of the diehards are going to stay in there and preserve the Tesla price. I think Levine's covering this really, really well. Levine's got good angles on this. I can't repeat them right now because there's a lot of strands to him, and he's a mergers and acquisitions lawyer, former mergers and acquisitions lawyer, and sees this
and
stuff
investment banker. I think
and investment banker. Yeah,
Sachs
no, Levine's something else, man. Like I never miss his columns, and he's got a beat on this real good. So I think that anybody who really wants to understand this should go and read Matt Levine, who's all over it.
I know securities lawyers, like good securities lawyers at top firms, that they wake up every morning and reading Matt Levine is maybe not every morning. I think stuff usually comes out around 2 or 3 p.m. But that's part of their day.
Oh sure, I mean that's probably the best column in finance. Like it's always on point. He's funny, and he's really got a pulse on stuff. I really do like Levine.
Yeah, I also occasionally email him with questions that I'm too cheap to send to a securities lawyer, hoping that he'll answer them.
Does he?
He does. He
answers them?
Yeah, he does. I am a Bloomberg
Matt
subscriber.
Levine gives free legal advice to the dive.
Okay, so where should we go next here?
You should have him on the show, Steve.
I'd absolutely love to, but
he went on that The Distraction. The podcast is called The Distraction with David Roth and I don't know who else, but the Deadspin guys, the ex-Deadspin guys, but they had Levine on, must have been a couple weeks ago. So I don't know, maybe go ask him.
Yeah. So look, what are you watching right now in terms of the market? What are you waking up every morning? There's got to be something that you're looking at going, okay.
The dive, man. The deep dive. That's what every morning, read it every morning. It's on the pulse. That's what I read. Apart from that, telecom, right? Telecom. And I mean, here's a little inside baseball for the viewers. Okay. A little inside baseball for the viewers. On our Monday call, right? We have a Monday call that we, writers huddle up and, just, bullshit about what we're doing. And I was on about nationalize the wireless networks, right? Because it was right after Rogers did its whole nosedive thing. And Steve said, Braden, you got to give this commie stuff a rest because it's going to chase away our readership. And then he had me on the show, right? So maybe there's,
we haven't approved that article yet.
And yeah, maybe we should do it after I push the article, possibly. But what's really interesting?
Give us
right
the case,
then,
Braden. Give us the case. Why should we nationalize the telecommunications networks? Yeah.
All right.
Are you talking about wireless? Are you talking about internet? Are you talking about cable? What exactly is it that we're nationalizing here?
I'm okay. Let's just keep it to wireless just for now, right? Okay. We had a situation this past Friday in Canada where the Rogers wireless network went down, right? And it was, it screwed up everyone and everything, right? And literally everything. Even guy, I'm on Bell, so my phone worked, but I couldn't call anyone who was on Rogers. Meanwhile, it turns out a lot of these payment networks, they use the Rogers network. I mean, I didn't know that until suddenly you went to the bar and they wouldn't take your card because, there's no, and a lot of these places don't take cash either. So they were screwed, right? So not to mention people couldn't reach 911. People I think the CRTC had a Rogers phone and you couldn't reach them, right? So you imagine they're pretty pissed. We've got three major carriers in Canada, Rogers, Bell, and TELUS. Right. And there's also Freedom Mobile, which is kind of like the little baby brother. Right. And most recently, Rogers is trying to buy Shaw, and the Canada Competition Bureau, who's in charge of, antitrust stuff and make sure there's no big, conglomerates running anything. They said, no dice. We can't do that because if you guys buy Shaw and Freedom with it, then there's too few carriers. Then there's only going to be three carriers, and we need three and kind of four. This little one here too. That's big for competition, apparently, according to the Competition Bureau, who I guess knows something about it. Anyway, so they're in the middle of Shaw's in the middle of selling Freedom to Quebecor, right? Which Quebecor got apparently a good deal at $2.5 billion. 2.2 billion. I don't know what a good deal is. I guess that sounds like a good deal. Great. I'd pay that, and they were about to do that. And then here comes the Rogers network comes down. Right. And, so I feel like now is the time to be talking about and thinking about the fact that, these three companies, own and operate vital public infrastructure. Right. And they do so at an enormous profit. I got some shit right here. In fact, you know what? Maybe we can drop some charts in here if you guys want. But the dividends paid by these companies. Okay. Bell pays about $2.5 billion a year in dividends over the past 10 years on average. Right. Rogers and TELUS pay about $1 billion. Right. Just shy of $1 billion. Right. Dividends in their G's. Now that does not count buybacks, which is considerably more. I hadn't worked it all out yet. Right. But wireless is the largest part of their businesses. All of these businesses have other verticals, usually cable. Bell and Rogers have cable TV. Bell does content, right? Rogers owns the Blue Jays and stuff. They own TV channels and things. But wireless is the biggest business and the juiciest business, because once you've got that infrastructure, everybody always pays their cell phone bill. Right, you're not because they're gonna cut you off, and look what happens when they cut you off, right? So, Canada Competition Bureau is concerned with competition, is concerned with prices for consumers, which I guess is a good thing. I mean, my cell phone bill is $120 a month. That seems like a lot to me, but in theory, without competition, it'd be a lot more. I don't know, right? But the fact of the matter is, the competition happens on price, and you've got to, if you want to undercut someone else. If you want to undercut a competitor to get a larger share of the market, the discount that you're offering has to come from somewhere, right? And it's not going to come out of that dividend, right? Because they're competing for market attention too. They're competing for market price. So the shareholders aren't going to like that. So it's got to come out of somewhere. So if you're Rogers, do you cut corners on the network? Do you cut corners on staffing? You're going to have to cut corners on something, right? If you're really going to compete. So, and I don't know if that's why the network went down, but I do know the network did go down, and I do know it wasn't any good for anything, right? We've got, the market caps of these companies. Let me just figure it out here. Hold on a second. I got this all in a spreadsheet somewhere. Okay. TELUS's market cap is 30 billion, right? Bell's market cap is 44 billion. Rogers' market cap is 23 billion. Okay, so those companies at those market cap,
and Rogers has a tremendous amount of debt, right?
Let's see here. I think they
the enterprise value is significantly higher than 23 billion.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. Absolutely.
Didn't they finance this whole thing through debt?
The Ted Rogers, the original Ted Rogers Sr., who built this thing, yes, was very big on, because it was a low rate environment, so they borrowed the hell out of everything. and ended up building, I mean, an empire. Like this is a banger of a business. It just spits out money, $1 billion a year in dividends, right? Let's see here. I'm looking up the debt for us. Debt maturity total, yeah, 19 billion in debt right now for Rogers. Oh, check. Sorry, 20.8 billion in total debt for Rogers maturing at various. And you think they're worried about it? They are not, right? Because they've got a juggernaut of a stock. They've got enormous amounts of revenue from wireless that isn't going to stop. Nobody's going to stop paying their wireless bill. That just doesn't happen. You need that phone, right? I mean, it's replaced landlines. It's an essential public service. So at that point, it's a sure thing. That money is camping on a sure thing, right? And if the point of capital markets is to drive innovation, if the point of capital markets is to drive development, then why are we letting all this money just camp on an essential service and bleed it? That doesn't make any sense, right? So if they did nationalize the cell networks, all of them, right? It's not like, oh, we own this now, screw off. No, they buy it, right? The government would buy it, and that money would be forced up the risk curve, right? It would be forced to find something else.
So what you're telling me is that if we could nationalize the telecommunications companies, we could save Ianthus.
Hopefully, it would be up to Ianthus to go and get the money, right? There certainly would be more.
It's coming down the risk curve.
Yeah,
Hadley Ford's back in business, baby.
It's a long way up the risk curve. There's that. I don't know if they'd really make that jump, but certainly they would. Certainly it stands to reason that capital would jump up the risk curve if there wasn't something else for it to go into, which often there is, including and especially residential real estate, including and especially oil services, right? That are also things that are where money can just sit there and collect rent, right? Which is not. It's not it's not how you drive economic growth, right?
Do you think the Canadians are too obsessed with real estate, or do you think that that it's just by chance we've never had a real estate crash over the last 30 years, so our real estate prices just got ahead of everybody else?
Well, I mean, I basically real estate is the same thing as the telecommunications network. Right? Nobody's going to not pay their rent, not unless they can't afford it and are completely, it's not, it's an essential service. Everybody needs a roof over their head. It's sure thing money, right? So it's not surprising that capital, lunged head first into real estate, especially when you don't have to pay tax on the sale of your primary residence, right? It's just, very, very low risk and high return money in that sector. Right. So as long as you've got policies that make it that way, right, then of course the money's going to go there. It's not, it's not difficult. Buying gets buying and trades get trades. And I really can't blame anybody who's plowing their money into real estate on low rates, right? When there's low rates, it's the move, right? Now that the rates are going up, well, we'll have to see. I think it's interesting that rates went up a point, right? Or 100 basis points, right? And where are we at now? 2.5% is the overnight rate, and everybody's acting like it's Armageddon. 2.5%? Like I mean, how addicted were we to low rates?
Well, Braden, look, I really appreciate you hopping on here and doing this. This is a lot of fun. Hopefully you'll come back on and we can do this more often, talk about some of your stories. We didn't even get a chance to get into the bridging finance story that you did.
Yeah.
If anybody hasn't had a chance to read that, it's basically I don't know that the term Ponzi applies to it or not. Certainly malinvestment would be fair.
It's certainly a fraud. Yeah.
And it's just there's numerous pieces there. Go to the deepdive.ca or .com now. We actually own the .com. And
moving up.
and click on Braden's name and go and find those bridging finance pieces. Those are really well done. Braden, thanks so much for hopping on here.
Those are fun to write, and there's more to come on those too. I've actually been tracking Gary Ng, who's the only guy so far who's ever taken a charge over this. he's going through the court system now. Nothing all that newsworthy has happened to him quite yet. The lawyers and the Crown are still back and forth. You don't know if they'll settle or what, right? But we're still on that story. We're still, and I do still plan to write something about RCM Capital, who is the group who ended up owning PI Financial after all this. Their involvement in this is really quite interesting. It's kind of a long story, but hopefully we'll have something on that soon. And hopefully something about this telco stuff soon too. But yeah, thanks to everybody for reading. I'm really happy that people that dive like my stuff and read it.
My favorite part of that is where they warehoused a bunch of debt on a company's balance sheet who was going to build a private railroad from Alberta to Alaska, which seems like it's straight up from an episode of The Simpsons.
Yeah.
I'm thinking monorail.
The thing about that too is that the media loved it. Like the Calgary Herald loved it. There was papers in Alaska. They were just all about it. They're like, oh yeah, we can ship that Alberta crude to Alaska and bring it out of that port. And this is such a great idea. And meanwhile, like, they're just stealing money. Like, they're just stealing money. There's no there's the people invested in bridging so that bridging could make these loans to companies. They make this loan to this, railroad company, and Sean McCoshen straight up absconded with it, right? Like, there's no they wasted it on this or that or whatever. No, he just took it and bolted, and it's pretty wild. Like, it's pretty wild. And not only that, that guy had been doing this for years, right? Like, he'd been making these kickback loans to First Nations, well beyond what they ever should have borrowed. It was a whole mess that he was in, and he just walked around and operated. This guy was testifying before Parliament, trying to get his railroad built and stuff, the day before the OSC actually put the hammer down on bridging. So far, the RCMP is not involved. Nobody has caught a charge over this at all, other than Gary Ng, right? And he's sort of a bit player in all this, right? And he's also the kind of the easiest mark, right? They're the easiest case to make, whether they will eventually, I don't know. I asked them, they said no comment. There's just no way to know. I don't even know where McCoshen is. I don't know if anyone does. I just got no idea. So yeah, it's a hell of a story.
I just thought of an idea. Why don't we run a Ponzi on the Ponzi? And
Ponzi.
A Ponzi. What we're going to do is we're going to go get a bunch of money out of the CBC to pay us to produce a mini series on the whole debacle, but then Ponzi. We'll run away with those funds. And
or we could just do it. That'd be all right. If you can get the CBC to produce that, I'd be in. That'd be a good venture. I think somebody ought to do that, because there is a lot of interest in those stories. Somebody emailed me a Deloitte report that they received from a Freedom of Information Act that's all about the loans that McCoshen was making, that Usand Corp and McCoshen was making to the Pegwee First Nation and all those other First Nations. And it's thick, man. I'm not even through it yet. Just some reader emailed it to me. I think she was the one who made the information request, possibly. It's hard to say. I got back to her. If you're out there, Cindy, I am reading through that stuff. I don't want to, talk to her about it until I've read it and understood it. But there's a lot there, man. There's a lot there. And a lot of it's redacted, which was really interesting. So yeah, maybe some more to come on that.
Okay, well, Braden, thanks so much for hopping on here. It's always a pleasure. You're probably one of the most underrated writers in Canadian small caps. I've got you top 15, top 15, top 20 writers in Canadian small caps.
Top 15, okay.
Sub $2 billion market cap. You're definitely in the top 15, top 20.
Hey, look out, Margaret Atwood. Here I come, right?
Awesome. Thanks so much, Braden.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. See you guys.
Thanks so much for watching. And if you want more Braden's content, go over to the deepdive.ca, click on Braden Mack, and you will see some of the content that we have discussed today. In addition to that, guys, let us know what you think in the comment section. All right. Thanks, everybody.